WFYI podcasts are brought to you by Visit Bloomington. With over 350 restaurants to choose from, Bloomington, Indiana is truly a food lover's paradise. Go to visitbloomington.com to discover what suits your taste.
This is WFYI News Now. It's February 22nd, and I'm Darian Benson. On today's show, IU researchers developed a blood test that measures the current severity and future risk of psychosis. A Senate committee passed the Antisemitism bill working its way through the State House. And Indiana health and sex educators say a proposed bill at the State House could lead to less sex ed in Indiana schools.
And is that the ultimate goal, that we want to put as many barriers in place for this type of education so that it doesn't happen? And that's what it feels like.
Those stories coming up, but first, high school seniors across Indiana are invited to College Goal Sunday, an event to help students and families fill out the application for federal student aid. From WFYI's Education Desk, Sydney Dauphiné explains the program helps more students afford college.
This Sunday, financial aid professionals will be at 40 locations across the state to help students complete their FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. Students attending should bring a parent or guardian with their 2022 tax information. College Goal Sunday events will be held around Indianapolis at Arsenal Tech High School, Ivy Tech Community College, and Lawrence North High School. Indiana's priority deadline for FAFSA is April 15th. More information on the event can be found at collegegoalsunday.org. I'm Sydney Dauphiné.
Researchers from Indiana University School of Medicine developed a blood test for people with schizophrenia and related psychotic disorders. The test identifies biomarkers in a patient's blood that measure the current severity and future risk of psychosis. It also can predict which medications might work well for that patient. Psychiatry professor and lead researcher Dr. Alexander Niculescu says the blood test is a game changer.
First of all, help doctors assess somebody objectively, not just by talking to them. And then secondly, help them choose from a list of options what medication might be a best fit for that patient so that we don't have this whole trial and error process.
The test is expected to be available later this year from Indiana University's spin-out company MindX Sciences. Niculescu says the next step is to get the test approved by insurers so that it is more widely accessible. A Senate committee yesterday unanimously passed a bill that would define and ban antisemitism in state public education institutions. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Violet Kumber-Weiland reports the amended bill takes out a portion of language around the definition of antisemitism that initially drew controversy.
The amended bill uses language from the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of antisemitism, but takes out references to the IHRA directly in its examples of antisemitism. The definition itself initially drew controversy, as some said the examples in the definition too closely conflated criticism of the State of Israel with antisemitism. Rabbi Hal Shevitz disagrees.
IHRA and that version of the bill still allow for criticism of Israel in the same way that we would criticize any government for policies with which we disagree, including our own.
He adds the pre-amended version of the bill was necessary to define and combat antisemitism. Proponents of the amended bill say removing these examples from the definition prevents free speech from being limited while still combating antisemitism. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Violet Kumber-Weiland.
The bill now heads to the Senate floor for consideration. And for our final story today, Indiana lawmakers proposed legislation that would create additional hurdles for educators that want to teach human sexuality. Senate Bill 128 would require school boards to approve all materials used in classrooms to teach it. Tammy Carter fears the legislation could lead to less sex ed in Indiana schools. She's the CEO of Life Smart Youth, a nonprofit that provides a variety of health education programs to more than 100 Indiana school districts. WFYI investigative education reporter Lee Gaines spoke with Carter about the bill.
I want to just set the scene here and say, we've seen a lot of laws targeting how sexuality and gender are discussed in schools, both here in Indiana and in states across the country in recent years. So can you tell me, broadly speaking, how the politicization of these topics has affected your ability and your organization's ability to provide sex and health education in schools?
Yeah, so I'd say we've noticed some schools, one, either pulling back and not bringing us in for programming, or asking us to make significant changes to programming. And I'll give you an example. In our human growth and development classes, usually around the 6th grade, and one of the topics is masturbation. And a school just asked us to flat out do not talk about that. Like, that is taboo. They did not want that talked about. So fear of like parent groups who might organize or superintendent pressure definitely impacted our business.
Yeah, I just want to first start off here by summarizing what the current law does say about sex education in Indiana, which is that it's not required. Schools don't have to teach sex education except for lessons on HIV and AIDS. And last year, elected officials actually passed a law banning sex education instruction prior to the 4th grade. We also have a law on the books that requires schools to notify parents twice to give them an opportunity to opt their children out of sex ed instruction. So Senate Bill 128 adds to these existing statutes by requiring schools to get approval from their school boards of any human sexuality curriculum that they plan to teach, and it requires this information to be posted online. Can you tell me a little bit about how this bill could impact the work that your organization does and why you came out in opposition to it?
Largely because it's really redundant. There's already a practice of going before governing bodies if that's what a school requires. In a lot of cases, the school administration, be it the principal, school counselors, school social workers, will vet the curriculum. As you've already stated, parents already have the right to opt out. We provide all of the notices required by law and then some. And in that, we provide a passcode for parents to access our portal. And our portal is only for parents whose students will be in one of our classes, and they can see the full curriculum, they can see all of the videos, and all of the instructional supports. I think one of the things that's really kind of painful about this is what I foresee as the requirement now to meet with all of these school boards by a particular date. So how much time am I spending just with the school board annually? And the other thing is our materials are proprietary. We have purchased evidence-based curriculum that have cost us money, and we have to sign off saying that we're not going to give this proprietary information away. And now this law requires that we do so.
The proponents of this bill, the lawmakers who are behind this, say that all this does is increase transparency around a sensitive issue. What's your response to them?
I love that part because I do believe parents need to be involved in the process of what's being taught to their children. I do support that wholly, which is why all of the things I just said to you about how we make information available to parents is there. And again, I make the argument it's redundant because it's already there. I don't know what this bill does differently other than as a not-for-profit professional forces me to spend my already limited resources going around meeting with governing bodies when school officials are already entrusted with the power to approve curriculum. Does it ultimately end up in the programming not happening? And is that the ultimate goal, that we want to put as many barriers in place for this type of education so that it doesn't happen? And that's what it feels like. It feels like unnecessary barriers.
Tammy, I just want to thank you so much for this conversation.
Happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
That's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by the following people who live in your community: Abriana Herron, Drew Daudelin, Kendall Antron, who composed the music for this podcast, and me, Darian Benson. Our news director is Sarah Neal-Estes. If you liked today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.